This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf on the We Made This podcast network. Except this isn't about Red Dwarf today, it's about something very different that just happens to have one of the Red Dwarf actors in. With me to discuss it is Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Give me 2 moments, Mark. I'm just buying myself a tan jacket and some tight jeans.
Good choice. We're also joined by Matt Latham.
Just bear with me a second, I'm just putting some money on some horses.
Good. So we're discussing, in more detail than we have with any other kind of Red Dwarfy related thing, Crime Traveller. We've decided to do it episode by episode for all 8 episodes for the next 8 weeks, one a week. And it's basically because the three of us have very, very fond memories of the show. But why did you two particularly want to go into this much detail rather than just discussing it all in one episode?
I love this show. Just growing up, being a fan of kind of adventures and detectives and science fiction as well. When I found out this was coming out, I was like, this sounds great, because I hadn't caught much Doctor Who prior to its cancel. I think I saw the very last serial before it got cancelled, the last Sylvester McCoy.
Survival.
Exactly, yeah, Survival. And it was just that thing on a Saturday evening of something to watch that seemed like, for me, that was cool. And this seemed really cool. It had Michael French from Eastenders, who at the time I did watch a fair bit of Eastenders. And again, of course, it had Chloe Annett in it from Red Dwarf. And I was like, oh, cool, this looks like it's going to be quite good. And the trailer was fun, and I love the pun of the title. It's just, it still holds a very, very dear place in my heart. And watching it again recently for this just has warmed my heart to it all over again. I love it so much.
Well, I was trying to think about this. I don't think I actually watched it again since, I think, perhaps it aired. So I remember watching it, I remember loving it, I remember really getting into it, and I remember at some point going, oh yeah, I'm going to go and get the DVDs for these, and I remember seeing them in HMV and thinking, no, I don't have the 40 quid on me to buy this box set, and I never did, so I never really rewatched it, and I always have fond memories of it. So when we was like chatting about Crime Traveller, and I can't remember if it was a joke at first, saying, oh, should we do each episode individually? And I think me and Carl was like, yes.
It was a joke. It was me that suggested it. And as with many things on this podcast, we are painstakingly eking out as much Red Dwarf periphery as we possibly can. This is basically replacing or postponing our coverage of Series 8. You realise that?
And I don't care.
Yeah, but I think, and I've always wanted to rewatch it. And I was thinking about this earlier, actually. I'm starting to wonder whether I might have catched a run of it on Gold years ago, or not. But I still somehow have vivid, strong memories of certain aspects of certain plots, certain visuals that I'm sure I've not seen since the original airing 25 years ago. And it's always stuck in my head. There's a lot of this show that somehow managed to nest and just never left. And I was like, I always wanted to kind of find an excuse to sit down and rewatch it properly. And now we have.
Talking about the DVDs, I did have the DVDs when they did come out. And at the time I was collecting a lot of DVDs. And a few years later, I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm never going to, as I think everybody does from time to time, like, I'm going to clear all this out. And at the time, I was like, Crime Traveller, why did I buy that? And it's only from watching this again, it's like, I need to buy the DVDs again. And I've already looked up on eBay about getting the DVDs again, and I can get the whole series for £10 now, and I'm going to get it, and I'm going to put it on my shelf in pride of place, and I'm never going to get rid of it again, because this is a fantastic series.
Well, that's exactly what I did. I bought it off eBay. I think it cost me £8.90 or something. But my memories of this were a lot vaguer than both of yours, actually. For me, it was just something that I remember explicitly watching because Chloe Annett from Red Dwarf was in it. And I actually looked it up. This aired on the 1st of March 1997, which was in between episode 7 and episode 8 of Red Dwarf 7, which means that there was double Chloe Annett that week.
What's interesting is that I think, and I perhaps should have checked this, but it's only just come into my head as you was talking, I'm pretty sure the first series of British Empire, I think that episode aired, the first episode I think aired either a week after the latest season of Red Dwarf at the time, or at least near the end of it. I think there was some kind of crossover with the air dates for the British Empire as well.
The dwarf connected universe.
But for me, I haven't seen it subsequently to that, and I do remember I enjoyed it at the time. I didn't love it. I didn't obsess with it like maybe I did with WCW Worldwide or indeed Red Dwarf at the time. But I did remember it quite fondly. And so I was just curious to see whether or not it does hold up and it is worth bothering with. And I kind of think it is, actually.
Yeah, it's Anthony Horowitz, who went on to write for things like Foyle's War.
I think he created it, I think.
Yeah, the big thing he went on to create after this was Midsummer Murders, of which I am a massive fan. And I think it's possibly why I love Crime Traveller so much or why I love both of those series so much is the writing. I just enjoy the writing. The performances are good. Yes, they're, as we'll probably get into, they veer on the air of cheese, but it still works. It's just good, fun television.
Well, if we're looking at the cast very briefly, we've got Barbara Royal, Kochanski, David Wicks, and one of the kids from Narnia.
It's great.
That's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that from the original Narnia?
Yeah, the BBC Narnia.
Who was that?
That was Nicky, who was one of the Narnia kids.
I've now done. I've dubbed him Chris from Life on Mars.
Well, yes, but this was pre-Life on Mars, which was also very good, but doesn't have a Red Dwarf link, so we can't do it.
No. I bet we can find one.
And I just want to say one thing before we start looking at the episode. Right. Jeff Slade is so 90s as a name, and it might as well be Jake Bullitt.
Yeah, it's a weird British-American hybrid, because Slade, Detective Slade. Jeff. If it was Geoff, that would be probably a bit more in it. It'd be like calling him like Keith Dagger.
No, with a name like Keith Dagger, I'm really like second guessing my Hob Boldness name now, when I should have just asked you to name him.
I'm sure I've seen Keith Dagger in pornography.
More than likely.
One thing that I didn't think was very 90s was the theme. It sounded like Ship Poirot theme.
Well, the writer and creator got the idea from this from watching Poirot, and I don't really know how he managed to get from that to this.
Wasn't he writing Poirot?
He might have been writing Poirot, but it was just that thing of, maybe Poirot would have solved this quicker if he could have gone back in time by 8 hours. That's the episode of Poirot we all wanted to see, was when Poirot discovers time travel and has to avoid himself in order to not cause a schism.
Time traveling Poirot.
Yeah, I would watch the fuck out of that, but you know. And this actually had really good viewing figures.
Yeah.
And never got a second series. And I looked at that as well. And apparently it was just basically that there was no one around during a transitional period for BBC drama, which meant that no one recommissioned it when maybe they should have done.
Yeah, it got over 8 million people an episode.
It fell down the back of the settee, didn't it? So
yeah. It was, I think by the time that they could have recommissioned it, Michael French was off to Holby City. And they were putting a lot of money behind that, I remember at the time, the spin-off of Casualty. And he went straight into that for a good 4 or 5 years, I think. So he was all tied up, and I can imagine that if they did go, oh, do you want to do Series 2 of Crime Travel? It's like, I can't, I haven't got time.
Mm. Is there anything else either of you want to talk about in general about the series before we get into the first episode?
The only thing I think is perhaps as a whole is the name Jeff Slade. I think the episode title is Jeff Slade and the Loop of Infinity. Part of me is wondering whether that's kind of like a homage to like 1950s, 1960s serials. Like, I can't remember, I might have got the name wrong, like Quakermass and the Pit, or is it Alan Quakermass and the Pit, or where you've got like first name, last name, and the science fiction thing.
Oh yeah, like Buck Rogers and his adventures in the 21st and a half century, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it does feel like that.
There's a pulpy element to it, I think, particularly just for the name of the episode more than anything.
But the thing is, right, he doesn't actually end up in a loop of infinity.
No, but the threat's there, and we don't know. I mean, we'll probably talk about this as we go into the series, that the rules are laid out, but the rules get a bit bendy at points in terms of like, we've got to be here for this time, and we've got to be back within the half a second or whatever it was, when there's a couple of episodes where they get back like in plenty of time. But I mean, Michael French's portrayal of Jeff Slade in it as well is a very kind of almost Flash Gordon sort of. It's weird because it starts off and you think he's like, oh, he's a blokey bloke almost. But as the series goes on, you realise he's actually quite soft and nice. But in the first one, he's just like, way, a bit of a lad. Oh, and, look at my tight jeans. And
on the verge of handing his badge and gun to to the police chief.
We'll come back to the gun. But shall we start the episode?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is episode 1 of Crime Traveller, and it's called Jeff Slade and the Loop of Infinity, as we said. It was broadcast on the 1st of March 1997, which was a Saturday, so it was kind of like Saturday evening television. And it starts with a train station. A team of police officers discuss their operation to catch someone. They don't have enough evidence yet, and the clear maverick of the group is someone called Slade, who states that they know he did it. They're all undercover and mooching about, and they can't see the guy. Slade spots an attractive woman. The youngster member of the team spots the perp, but Slade thinks there's something wrong and goes in early, spooking the bad guy, who is called Silverman, and he gets to escape in a car. And, I mean, it's an interesting start.
It's like an action car chase car motorbike chase on a primetime Saturday evening BBC show, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't remember that bit.
The foot chase, you kind of go, fair enough, the foot chase. But then he jumps on a bike and chases after the car, and the car goes launching into presumably the Thames. I'm guessing it's in London. But it's not what you expect. And I think that's the thing, is they wanted to put this in. So it's like, first episode, right out of the gate, look at this humongous stunt. And he gets fired in the first 10 minutes.
Right. Here's the thing, though. The hard female gaffer, the maverick, the dopey one, and the young lad. Is it me, or is that cop show cliche 101?
That's cop show cliche 101. Yeah. We got the young and naive, inexperienced one who basically Chris from Life on Mars, even though it predates this by about 11 years. Yeah. And then you got Ray from Life on Mars, who's the kind of just there to get a paycheck and just I'm here. What do you want me to do? Yeah. Right, I'm off home. Right, who's pretty much every single scene he's in, you can tell he doesn't give a shit because he's always chewing gum with his mouth open, those people who just don't seem to know how to chew without closing their mouths.
Yeah,
he's one of those obnoxious people. Yeah, you can tell no one likes him in the office because that's what he does. He's that, and that's his only sole attribute for the whole of this episode that we know about the character. Morris's name, I think he is. That's the only person we know about him. And yeah, you've got the Slater chief kind of trope from Last Action Hero.
It's so tropey. In particularly, it's established the "damn you, Slade," and I don't think I care that it's tropey, but it was obvious from the very first Damn You Slade that was very much going to be a catchphrase of the telly show.
Yeah.
And I was right.
I mean, the thing is with cliche is if they're done well, it's fine. And I think this is a show that knows what it is, in that it's not trying to be like, yes, there's some science explaining going on, because otherwise you kind of lose the thread of what's happening. But for the most part, it's a fun cop drama that's not taking itself super seriously, which I think also ties into the fact it's almost like heightened reality, because I forgot that he's got a gun, and I can't remember why I forgot that. But just to think of, he's got a gun in it, and you're just like, why? Just sort of...
Yeah. I think we need to, let's just discuss the gun straight off the bat. What British police officer, particularly a fucking crazy maverick like Slade really is, there is no way a British police officer would have the gun that he has, and certainly get away with using it the way he does. And it's just bonkers. I'm completely confused by it.
It's not as much in this episode, but certainly in the next one, there's moments where it's like, oh, you're so fired. You're so fired for his use of the gun.
I mean, it's not just that. Yeah. We'll get into his ethics, I'm sure, very soon. But the gun thing completely baffles me. Even in 1997, were we that completely and utterly influenced by American culture to the point that we didn't suspend our disbelief that a British police officer had a gun and waved it around like he'd got a toffee apple?
I think you just get caught up in it, don't you? It's the thing, because it's weird, because none of the others have got guns.
No, and I would have thought that, dickhead bloody Morris would have wanted a gun if Slade had got one. And why has he got a gun, but his boss hasn't got a gun? Don't give the child a gun.
No.
But he's a maverick. He doesn't play by anybody's rules, even his own, which I think is a paraphrase from a Family Guy episode that I think... Yes,
but he'd get fired if he was that much of a maverick.
Yes, but again, it's the heightened disbelief, and it's the, to be fair, it's never confirmed that the person that he's chasing, Silverman, died. Did he die? Did he drown?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So basically, he commits manslaughter, more or less.
Does he actually fire it?
I can't.
The gun?
Yeah. Does he?
I can't immediately think of an instance where he fires it. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, because I think he takes it out.
Surely he must.
He takes it out and uses it to get people to get out of his way and stuff, but I don't remember him firing it.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I have watched all 8 of the episodes recently, but you're right. I can't immediately think of an instance where he actually does anything other than use the gun as persuasion. So yeah, anyway, Slade does, as we've said, give chase on a motorbike, and he causes insane amounts of accidents and property damage on his way to a multi-story car park that the baddie has tried to escape him. And this Silverman then tries to murder him by smashing into his motorbike. Slade jumps off the motorbike, and he can't stop the car. He smashes through a wall and lands in a river. And it's like, what?
Something as well is when before this starts, Silverman's looking around and looking all sort of anxious about am I being watched? Am I being watched? All 4 of our main police protagonists are holding giant walkie-talkies and not even bothering
I know!
to hide them. Slade's is on his table where he's drinking a coffee. It's
you are right.
This is before they had comms in dramas. I've recently finished binging Leverage Redemption, the sequel series to the TV series Leverage, and one of the tropes that it's in loud stuff now. I think it might be in Hustle as well, where you just got the inner ear comms things where you just see people randomly talking to themselves when they're actually talking to people in a microphone in the ear and stuff. And
Yeah.
But I think that if that was today, they would be having all have comms where they just like hold the ears and stuff. But I think that's like a
'cause-
product of the 90s where you
'cause
couldn't.
Sue Johnston's just walking around with hers, like in the middle of the railway station. She's just walking around with it in her hand. So it's no wonder
It's
he
magnificent.
Yeah.
But this whole scene, there's huge amounts of destruction, including cars. That's budget. That this clearly had investment in it for the Beeb. They wanted a hit. And the other thing I noticed about the cars, man, this is really 90s. Those 90s cars got smasherooed.
Yeah, there's a lot of car stuff going on in the first few episodes, especially. We'll get to one in the next episode. But yeah, there's a lot. And it's Danny's prize, what looks like a Cortina that we see at one point as well, that he's outside buffing, and everything's like very 90s cars.
I mean, what dated it for me for the cars was the fact I think it might be Slade's car that I only noticed it watching in the next episode, was a Rover.
Mm.
Yeah, they don't make Rovers
Yes. No, they don't. Huh, good point. I think it was more just the general car boxiness, because I'm not a
Yes.
huge car guy, but boxy 90s cars where they all look like Volvos, it was on point in this scene. And yeah, next up, the next scene is an attractive woman, the same attractive woman that we saw in the train station, in a lab coat, and she's doing a lot of cop science type stuff.
Cop science. That sounds like the spin-off to Crime Traveller. Cop science coming soon.
Cop science.
Starring Monkfish
Starring Keith Dagger.
as Inspector Monkfish.
This is the only cop show I've ever seen where the science officer is in the same, floor of the building as everybody else. Normally they're on their own in a lab somewhere. She's got basically an office. It's the tiniest police lab I've ever seen on a television show.
You say that, but I suddenly have Dexter in my head because Dexter's lab's just right next to where all the police stuff.
I never watched that much Dexter, so yeah, that's probably...
Is science officer a legitimate title for someone that would work for the police? I don't think you have science officers. You have like pathologists and advisors. You don't have Surely you don't have like a science officer. Would you have a culture officer as well?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I immediately thought that I forgot that she was science officer. I thought she was like a forensic officer or something like that. But no, she's science officer in apparently a department of like one. So she's the only person.
She's the Swiss Army person, where she has to be everything at once. Okay, you got to put your chemist hat on, you got to put your biologist hat on, you got to put your physicist hat on. And
I think what I want to point out as we go along, we are clearly gleefully mocking some of the very silly elements of this show, but I'd be damned if I'm not already completely hooked by the time we've had this car chase and discovered that this science lady's got a secret. We're about 5 minutes in, and I'm already buzzing off this telly show.
It's amazing. It's quite a good thing in how it's literally taken 10 minutes for you to be in and go, he's that, she's that, this is what they're doing, let's go from here. Everybody's very well established very quickly.
What I quite like as well is that, sorry if I'm jumping the gun a bit as well, is that it shows you Holly time traveling before he fully kind of explains it with the kind of fish out of water. So you got your kind of your usual kind of pilot trope where it's a character who's unaware goes into orbit of character aware of fantastical thing. But here we actually get the point of view of Holly, and we get to see her. And you've had the kind of set piece with Michael French, who's kind of top billed, and you get the kind of impression this is kind of a vehicle for him, because I think the BBC have kind of cashing in on his still after on the high of his exit as David Wicks in EastEnders. But then the show then kind of thinks, okay, it's not just him. We've got Chloe Annett, so we're going to kind of give her kind of like badass intro moment as well. So and we're going to show you her doing this thing, and then we're going to explain it later. I really appreciate that aspect of it before her, instead of just her going, I've got a time machine. You actually see her use it first. I think that's pretty well done.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because you see her and she's walking through and she's got like the big fur coat on and she's looking all mysterious and very Scottish widows, and then
oh yeah,
love it.
That's yeah. I kind of wanted to briefly talk about the kind of design choices for the costume / like clothing, because I think Chloe Nett's given this kind of really nice, as like red jacket, which I don't think isn't supposed to be is an unintentional reference to Red Dwarf, I think. But I think anything out of that is right when you're not aware that, if we're supposed to see them and they're back in time, I think we're supposed to visually have a clues to know, oh, something's off, she's not wearing red. And I think the same thing will happen throughout the series with Slade if we're not aware that he's back in time yet as an audience. So when he's not wearing his, frankly, brilliant dark yellow tanned jacket, I think it's like kind of like a strikingly colourful visual clue to try and get you to hook. If he's not wearing it, it's like, oh, something's different here.
I didn't think that. Yeah, he does switch outfits very quickly in quite a few episodes. Yeah, about that.
Yeah, but yeah, I do appreciate the thing, and that yellow jacket. I mean, that yellow jacket's great, particularly with that yellow. I never thought I'd be talking about someone's clothes, but it's almost it almost seems to be a part of his character as much as like a Doctor Who outfit would be.
Oh, he's definitely got a 90s style that cannot be ignored. I think he was clearly supposed to be super cool guy with the cool jacket and the cool gun and the cool girlfriend and the coolness.
Well, his name's Jeff Slade, Mark. If you were born as Jeff Slade, you're like, I better be cool.
He probably came out the birthing canal with a thumbs up going, hey. The Fonz will probably take a step back and go, here, the jukebox yours. That's how cool Jeff Slade is.
Okay.
Nice.
Talking about Jeff Slade, DCI Grisham.
Ace Rimmer probably would have gone, what a guy. That's how cool Jeff Slade is.
For fuck's sake, man. So, DCI Grisham admonishes Slade in the police station. Labcoat Lady Holly gets told not now, and Grisham says she's going to fire Slade. Holly says to Slade that she thinks it's unfair, and Slade says he wants to turn back the clock so that he could question Silverman. Ooh, bit of foreshadowing.
It's funny because the whole premise of this show is like you can't really stop something that's happened. And Holly goes back in time on her own, and she's really effective. Like she finds the evidence in half an hour or something like that? She does it. It's only when she's got Slade with her that it all goes tits up.
That's actually true. I hadn't clocked that, but you've bang on. Slade's a liability.
Yeah, she's a wicked time-traveling detective on her own, but stick Jeff Slade in there and it all goes to pot.
Brilliant. So, Holly heads home via a chat with Danny, the porter, at her flats, and he gives her a package. Inside her flats, she has a massive super science contraption, and she adds the Ouija flip that she got from the package and tinkers further with the super science machinery. I loved it. I fucking loved it. It's basically a fucking TARDIS, and I don't care.
Oh, yeah. I love the relationship between Holly and Danny in that Danny knows something's up, but he's just not bothered with it because he thinks Holly's nice.
Yeah. Do you think there's maybe a little bit of a fancy there, or do you think that's I'm reading too much into it?
I think there's a bit of unrequited crush there, but I think it's quite an innocent thing. If you never see him like go for it, you're just like, oh no, he probably just thinks, oh, she's really lovely and she's nice to me, because I get the feeling from the way Danny's portrayed in this series that not a lot of people are.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Although Holly does say that the transdimensional mutator-thon or whatever it's called is for drying her hair, which is a bit kind of, it's quite funny because there's quite a few times in this series where Holly gets the you're a girl, so you must be able to sew/cook/this/the other. And she's very annoyed about it. But if she's trying to get away with something, she will do, I'm just for drying my hair. She knows how to lean in and to get round stuff, but she probably doesn't enjoy that at all.
Yeah. But, I mean, a lot of this kind of holds up. There's a lot of stuff where strong female lead, etc., but later on in the series, there are some moments that just made me go, oh, but that hasn't happened yet. So we're all being still super, super positive. Danny gets upset when the super science thingy sends the building's electronics haywire, and a boom signifies that something has happened in the super science room.
How has he not figured out where it's coming from?
I know, he's adorable in his ineptitude, isn't he, Danny?
Yeah, it's like one of those, like, next time, like, well, I think in a slightly different writing, he'd probably be the villain trying to snoop around saying, I know she's up to something, but they don't do it that way, do they? He's just like kind of innocently just going, oh, the electrics are gone again. So I don't think he's clocked on it's her that's causing the power issues, but
I think it's in the next episode where he tells Holly that the electric board tell him how many units of energy they're using, and he just tells them that can't possibly be true.
I really like the Danny character because, similarly to what you were saying, Matt, it's a gentle character that you might even argue is slightly underutilized. But I like it. I like that he's there. And I think had there been more series of this, maybe Danny could have had a more prominent role.
I'd like to think that there was if in a second series there'd have been an adventure to save Danny.
Yeah, or Danny accidentally ends up in the time travel room and accidentally time travels with them or something like that.
And they don't realise it and then realise last minute, like with certain men to go, that he's got to go back with them or something like that. Yeah, I think a future series would have had Danny kind of either accidentally or somehow gone back in time. Yeah, he's like a nice kind of like when I was just like expanding the world of Sundown Court or whatever the building is.
Yeah. So after the boom thingy, the timer spins back by 3 hours. Holly pulls it out and puts it on as a watch. And I immediately thought, I don't know about you two, but do you remember Pop's watches?
Vaguely. Yeah.
Oh, those kind of like weird things. Like if you held the button in, you could record yourself.
No, a Pop's watch was like, it was a thing made by Swatch watches where you had like, you bought all the elements separately. You bought the wristband, you bought the case, and then you bought the clock itself. And you could pop the clock and swap clocks with people or swaps and have multiple. Do you not remember Pop's watches?
I do. Yeah, no, I remember those.
I fucking loved my Pop's watch when I was a kid.
It was basically the way Swatch admitting that they're cheap and you can just replace the parts real easily, but let's use that to make some money.
I loved my Pop's watch, and this definitely reminded me of a Pop's watch. Just the way she popped it into a socket just really made me think about that.
It's a really inconspicuous watch as well, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's the size of a bottom of a coffee cup.
I'm surprised he's like working with a slate, like with a hand just dangling because it's too heavy to actually lift your arm up. But
no one really notices either. Maybe that's why she's got the big jacket. Is because that's the only thing with sleeves big enough to cover the watch.
Maybe they had that much thought into her outfit. I don't think they had that much thought. Holly heads out and goes to the station. She's travelled back in time, and she follows Silverman. She sees him leave a bag in lost luggage. She has an awkward conversation with him, and it flusters her, and she flees. She heads back to her flat, and the sciencey noise boom thing happens again.
I really appreciate and really like the bird's eye view every time the time machine goes on. They use the machine to either start or to get back, because it's a really nice kind of almost is it like a hexagonal kind of shaped room? I think it's hexagonal. I think right, and you just see the line, the kind of light, like a ring of light, just go down the room, and I really like the visual of that, and the fact it's like a bird's eye view of it. I think it's a very good visual, and it's one of the things I definitely remembered that stuck with me like forever.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, because it's, she's built it in her flat, how do we show that you're going back in time? And part of me thinks that they did that because there's also the weird grid thing where they go down on a screen where they go down a tube. That's on there. And part of me wonders, like, if that was the initial thing and they've gone, it's a bit crap. What else can we do? And having the fact that she has to close the blinds to complete the circuit as well. Yeah, it's just a really clever way of doing it because, you haven't got a TARDIS. She's not got like an industrial unit or something like that where she can house it. It's in her spare room, which another thing we'll get into in this series is how everyone's like, I'm so skint. And it's like, look at your houses. No wonder you're so skint. You're renting these places?
Ooh, that's a conversation we'll have to have next week when we do episode 2, Carl, because particularly with I do appreciate the kind of ramshackle kind of look. I mean, it looks clunky and it looks kind of 90s and thinking, why the hell is it that big? But when you think about it, it's a DIY time machine. I think it's going to be kind of really crazily massive. I mean, when you think about the first ever computers, they were the size of buildings and all they did was like complex maths. So I quite like the kind of big clunky laboursome way of having to do a thing like pushing buttons, pulling levers, and shutting the blinds to connect the circuit. I think is a great touch.
Oh yeah, if they did it now, she'd be an app developer, and you could go back in time by doing an app on the phone.
Yeah. So back at the station, Nicky helps Slade with his report, and then Slade has some bants with Morris about horses. And I thought, filler.
Oh, he's taking being fired remarkably well.
I know. But that scene is completely unnecessary to the plot. And they were obviously short by a few minutes.
I don't know. I think it's seeding the betting slip.
Yeah.
I think. So it's so the bit where the idea of putting money on the horses, I think, is seeded there. I just think I think it's just fleshing out that Slade, he likes a bit of the old betting of horses. So I think when he sees a betting shop later on, I think that he's just seeding that character trait, I think. So I don't think it's filler.
I think it's quite good in establishing the relationship he has with him and Morris and him and Nicky, in that, everybody likes Nicky, although he's a bit wet behind the ears. Morris is just a dickhead.
Yeah, but I think they'd already kind of established that enough already.
Yeah, well, I think Matt's right. It is all about the betting slip thing.
Yeah. So Holly goes to Slade with the left luggage, and then Slade and Holly take the evidence from it to Grisham. The murder weapon was in the left luggage, and Slade is no longer going to get fired. Slade thanks Holly for her help, but then queries timescales with her and how she could have been in 2 places at once. He asks her to trust him, but she says that he won't believe her.
Yeah, he's like adamant he wants to know, and then it cuts to her telling him how she did it, and he's immediately just like completely against what she's just said and completely disbelieving. But if you kind of think about it, there is really no other way she could have done it apart from a twin. It's yeah. So you could have some credence to it because he saw her with his own eyes. Mm-hmm. So she's managed to do this and help him. He could have been a bit more understanding about it, but I suppose it is very, very fantastical to say I'm a time traveler, or at least I've attempted it.
But I think it does establish that he is a very good detective because he clocks that she has done an impossible thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you get your cynical thinking hat on, when he gets back to the station, they start just having a chat about this, that, and the other, and he doesn't immediately turn around and go, "What were you doing at the station?" So it looks like he's taking information in before he comes to some form of conclusion because he is a detective. There's a thing he talks about in this series a fair bit, which is he goes with his feeling, or he goes with his gut, like a good detective does.
I'm not sure a good detective does that, actually.
No, well, Jeff Slade does, and he turns out to be a good detective in this series anyway. But he goes with his feeling.
He's a maverick.
He's a maverick.
He plays by nobody's rules.
But his reaction is quite funny. He's very flippant about it. And he says, go back in time and this conversation could never have happened. It's how I think anybody would react, I think.
Yeah, in the cafe, he doesn't believe her, like you say, and she explains that her dad was a scientist in time travel, and she's financing her own continuation of his research with the job she has at the police. She explains that her machine is only able to travel to the past and has variable times with each jump. When he continues to not believe her, she storms out, and then Nikki enters and asks Slade to come with him. It does feel a little bit exposition-y, but not kind of annoyingly so. It just needs to establish the rules, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah, it lays down the groundwork if you can't go to the future because the future doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Which I've seen, which turns up in a lot of science fiction, probably before this as well. But I remember thinking was quite clever when I watched it. I was like, yeah, of course you can't go to the future because it's not happened. And I like the fact that does she say it here or does she say it in the room where she's never really quite sure how far they're going to go back? She says that when they're about to do it, doesn't she?
Yeah, she says in the cafe that it's a variable amount of time.
Yeah.
And yet every episode it always seems to be decent enough amount of time.
Next up is Slade and Nikki in a car, and they're headed to a suicide, but Slade is skeptical. When they get there, there is a dead old man at the desk with a head wound. Everything was locked, the windows and the doors, and it looks pretty conclusive, but Slade spots a lamp outside that's been shot. There was no suicide note, and he used his wife's gun, but he was about to make £20 million. Grisham is also sceptical and asks Slade to look into it. Nikki finds a Giovanni's napkin, which is the cafe that he's just found him in. And Morris was supposed to be guarding a bathroom, but he took a piss at one point. There were caterers in there who were suspicious, but they have escaped. They then see the van leaving. As Slade leaves, a kid called Michael Lombard calls him Wilson and questions why he's there because he was there earlier for the catering. Complicated scene.
Yeah, two things. One, they killed the demon headmaster.
Yeah. Yes, Terrence Hardiman. Who frankly scared the living shit out of me as a kid.
Good.
Yeah. And the other thing is, when we meet Michael Lombard, who I'm sure has turned up in a lot of stuff, he's one of those actors you just recognise from the face, but what a hairdo.
It is spectacularly 90s, I agree.
It's like, do you remember the cartoons who did that ooh-ee, ooh-ah-ah, ting-tang, walla-walla, bing-bang?
Sorry, I'm not sure. Can you just go through that again?
Ooh-ee, ooh-ah-ah, ting-tang, walla-walla, bing-bang.
Ba 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 da ba ba ba.
Yeah. He's got hair like that, like the singer from there, or like Scratchy and Co.
He's got hair like I had in the 90s. Everyone had that fucking hairdo, Carl.
Oh, I hope there's photographs of that, Mark.
There are, and you can't see them.
But if you sign up to the We Made This Patreon...
We Made This OnlyFans.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Only for fans. Oh,
It is quite good though, because it's very apparent when things just don't start making sense in terms of he calls him Wilson and he's like, I've never met you before, of course you have, and he's this that, and the other, and then the van speeds off. You kind of go, part of you just kind of go, this is a time travel thing. He's met him before, but you still don't know how the murder happened, and you still don't know what's going to happen when they go back in time. So it's just setting this layer up of, there's a layer of puzzle on top of a puzzle, and you've got to work that out as well as finding out the basic puzzle of who killed Terrence Hardiman.
So do you know what this reminds me of more than it reminds me of Poirot? Jonathan Creek?
Yes.
Which I think was created by the same writer, wasn't it?
No, Jonathan Creek was David Renwick.
Oh, okay.
Of One Foot in the Grave.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never seen Jonathan Creek, actually. Never watched any of it. So the only thing I know about it is that Julia Swahalio was in it once.
It's very good.
I like Jonathan Creek. It's very good.
First couple of series, especially, are very, very good. It took a bit of time to find its feet after Caroline Quentin left, but there's a couple of specials. They kind of stopped doing full series and just did like Christmas specials or New Year specials for a while, and they were still good. There's one, they get Sheridan Smith in as the new assistant for a couple of them, and they were really good.
Okay, it's one of those things that perhaps one day I'll watch when I've watched everything else. It's just never been on my radar apart from the name.
I think if you like Crime Traveller, you will like Jonathan Creek.
Oh, okay.
It's in that series of we need something to go on at 7:30, 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, like a big thing. And there was like this, Jonathan Creek, when they redid Robin Hood, Merlin, until eventually they did bring back Doctor Who as well, and then it became the show that goes on in between series of Doctor Who, and that's when you got like Merlin and oh god, what's the other one with all the Greek legends in it? Atlantis.
Atlantis was not good.
No, my friend worked on that, and he worked on the first series, and then I said, "Oh, I'm going to watch the second series because my friend Matt worked on it," and he messaged me going, "I'm not on this one. I don't work on this." I was like, "Thank God," and clicked it off.
Holly is shopping and Slade comes into the supermarket and says that he believes her now and kind of sort of apologises, but not really. He asks to give it a go and she says no. He goads her into proving it by being a bit of a bellend.
This happens a lot in this series. Is Holly, for a super intelligent scientist, invented a time machine, carried on the work of her father, falls for reverse psychology instantly. It's just like, I don't think you can do it. Oh, really? And that every episode, it seems like she just falls for it. But she realizes it's when she's like loading up the time machine in a few of them, she's got that tone in her voice of "Can't believe I've fallen for this again."
There's a pre-established relationship between them, I think, or a friendship at least, and because I think she kind of goes out of her way to try and prove Slade's innocence in the first jump back. So
True.
I think that he's either always being quite nice to her, or he's always acknowledged existence, because he doesn't seem to be overly flirty or creepy. He just always seems to just treat her quite equal, more or less. So I'm wondering whether she's always had like either, if not a soft spot, but she's always kind of taken a shine to him already.
It does feel a bit like a will they, won't they type situation, and that's okay.
Yeah, but I got a feeling that she's probably likes him, probably has a thing for him, but doesn't realise it yet, or she's unaware that she likes him.
I've been rewatching these episodes, and at the end of most episodes, you could, when it fades to the credits, the scene beforehand, you could probably put in the script, and then they go at it, and it would fit in perfectly fine.
So she takes him to the time machine. She explains that there's no porting back until the time's up, and meeting yourself calls something called a schism. You also have to be back at the machine at the correct time, otherwise you will get caught in a loop of infinity.
Is this the point to discuss the very, very massive suspension of disbelief having plot hole the series has?
Go on.
So the rules are you have to turn up at the time you left to use the machine to not get caught in the loop of infinity.
Yes.
Why don't they walk into themselves using the machine? If Holly is sat in that room having a cup of tea and then uses the machine, she's going to be sat in there for 15 minutes. And then like 15 minutes before, and then they've got 15 minutes to use the machine. They're going to walk in on Holly sat in that room.
It's true, yeah. They talk about it being like a parallel dimension thing, don't they?
But then there's instances of them nearly crossing over and meeting each other. So theoretically, they should be in that room about to use the time machine.
Yeah, it is probably the biggest continuity gaffe that you could do, or logic gaffe. I think I remember thinking this at the time, that they should really just be running into themselves coming out as they're going in.
Do you know, I hadn't thought about it until you said it, but now I'm trying to think there's got to be something.
Yeah, it would get explained, I think.
I think our goal for the 8 episodes that we're covering this is to headcanon how that's possible, because I think it's a massive leap, it's a massive suspension of disbelief, but I wonder if we can, by episode 8, headcanon why they don't walk into each other. That's the challenge.
Okay. They see Danny in a car accident through the window. Holly activates the machine after explaining you can't change history, you can only observe. After the time machine is activated, they have 10 hours, and she has a synchronized watch with reminders. And it was at this point when you got a better look at the watch. There was like, that looks like a fucking pager. This couldn't be more 90s. Fucking pops watches and pagers.
Pops, watches, and pages. I feel that's going to be the name of the book you eventually write about 90s television, Mark.
Yeah, maybe.
One of the things as well that I think's established here, which I think doesn't pay off in this episode, but will pay off in the next episode, is the fact that because the watch will beep loudly at, I think, is it 3 hours?
1 hour.
1 hour.
1 hour, and then constantly in the last 3 minutes.
Yeah, and it will bleep loudly just to remind you. And I quite like that. I don't think that's mentioned. That rule's mentioned in the next episode, but it does pay off in that one. And one of the memories I have is that I've got a sneak suspicion that I think there's a sense of continuity that's quite unheard of in '97 for this kind of show. And I think that's kind of established here, where there's like certain rules that they'll do and what they'll mess around with on the show. And I quite like how that's established now, and it gets paid off later down the line.
It's good as well, and it gives you built-in tension. So, if the watch goes off, you're in trouble, basically, or you're possibly about to be in trouble, which we get over the course of over the rest of the series. That it's a good thing. Although I don't remember, because I'm sure she says it beeps constantly during the last 3 minutes. And I think that gets waylaid because it'd just be purely irritating for the person watching the episode.
It does make me think, like, Monster of the Week with ongoing plot. It's, again, something that only really became a big thing in the 90s with stuff like Buffy. And this program, just everything about it is wonderfully 90s.
You can see where this moved into Midsummer Murders, because we go from, the first episode, was it an engineer magnate who's about to sell to the Japanese, and the next one, it's her auntie who's happens to be this. It's just completely random, almost situations that they just seem to know everybody. Like the third episode, it's a fashion show. But yeah, it's got that overall thing of trying to avoid the loop and their ongoing chemistry with each other. Yeah, I really enjoy the writing on this.
Slade gets really confused when he sees Danny and the car isn't damaged. He's completely flabbergasted and is delighted to find out who the killer is. I don't understand. Surely he is established as quite clever, and then he can't get his head around the fact that they've gone back in time, even though his plan was to go back in time.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what he was thinking would happen. Maybe it would be, something would happen. They didn't go anywhere. Maybe they'd make out, But maybe it's just that fascination. If your mate turned to you and said, I've got a time machine, you'd be like, okay, let's go then. But then if it didn't work, you'd be like, well, that was, 10 minutes of my life I'm not going to get back. But you wouldn't go, I'm all right, because you'd want to get in their time machine if they've got one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So they go to the caterers, and then they tie them up and steal their van.
At gunpoint.
Yes.
What the fuck? Suddenly, they've become the bad guys. This is a heel turn.
He's turned to Jack Bauer. This is a Jack Bauer thing. Before Jack Bauer was Jack Bauer.
I mean, okay, but that doesn't make it okay.
No.
Yeah.
The thing I don't get is, and this is going into the time travel thing, is they get there. He seemingly just points at the van at random, like, there, that's what we'll do. We'll nick that truck. Because they're just like running out in the street and they go there. And it was almost like they happened to go across the right caterers who are doing the job they're going to. It almost seems like incredible fluke that they'd walked into the right caterers and then held them up at gunpoint and locked them in a fridge. But yeah, that bit was a bit weird. Maybe they did know where they were going, but it didn't feel like that watching it. It just felt like he'd turned a corner and gone, look, we're going to steal that minivan there. And it just happened to be the right one.
Yeah. So there's a lot to like about this, and I knew I was going to rave about it, but that particular scene kind of did great with me. The good guys should not be punching innocent bystanders and tying them up and stealing their shit.
We don't know how the Department of Health handled their business, Mark.
Okay.
It was so quick as well. It was like Department of Health, get in the cupboard. Didn't even try and talk their way into the cupboard. No, just immediately pull a gun.
So, Guy Lombard bollocks Slade, who's now pretending to be the caterer. He tells him that Mrs. Wilson, pointing at Holly, will make a souffle. Lombard's wife comes in and he's a massive bell end to her.
How 90s is it that it's a souffle?
Yes, I don't think I've ever had souffle. What is souffle?
Well, how 90s is it that it's a souffle, which to me doesn't sound like a very exotic dish. And then at the end, when they appear to be in a really fancy restaurant, they order a cheese souffle.
Right, I haven't explained what souffle is. What is it?
And that's the amount of knowledge that we have on Shipwrecked and Comatose when it comes to cheese souffles.
Yep.
Right, I'm going to cook a souffle. I'm going to find a recipe. I'm going to cook a souffle. And on a later episode, I'm going to report back on whether or not souffle is good.
So you're that desperate for specials? You're going to do a special on you cooking a souffle?
No, but next block of these that we do, I'll have cooked a souffle and I'll report back. Maybe episode 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever. Anyway.
I wonder if you spell it THYME, time traveller. We always end up having like a food special spin-off. Us cooking, basically like time traveller, us cooking stuff that we see in the TV episode Crime Traveller.
He does go on to write Rosemary and Thyme.
Wow.
I mean, would it be better to do a podcast on everything Anthony Horowitz hasn't done?
It'd be a short series.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Lombard takes them to the kitchen and she tells them the catering that they want. Slade mentions the sale to the Japanese, but apparently it was confidential at that time, but they cover their back by quick thinking.
Badly.
Well, yes, it is bad, but yeah. Michael arrives and he is clearly not pleased with the sale to the Japanese. Holly can't cook a souffle, and Slade is wildly misogynistic and then gets coffee for Lombard.
Yeah, it is because doesn't he say like you've invented a time machine, but you can't cook a cheese souffle?
Get your priorities right.
Yeah,
it's just like fuck's sake. I just no. The thing is, Red Dwarf 7 has some moments like this in it as well that just makes me want to scream. So it's just 90s ick, isn't it? It was the norm for the time, and it's fucking batshit crazy that seems to be okay.
Yeah, I think in it as well there is a degree of friendship ribbing between the two characters, because what we see over the course of the series is he's not sort of misogynistic and chauvinistic, so it could just be that he's ribbing her, but yeah, it comes across very poorly.
So Slade listens at the door and Lombard is discussing the deal with his partner Mark, who doesn't want him to sell either, but Lombard is quite adamant. Mark says, "I won't let you do this." It does feel like this is written by someone who wrote Poirot.
Yeah.
It really does, doesn't it?
God damn it, you can't get away with this. It's that thing, it's like, you'll get away with this over my dead body. You know, that kind of, yeah. I love it. Just this detective melodrama. Because at the end of the day, it is a detective show that just happens to have time travel in it.
Yeah, it's a kind of... I like the blend of two genres. It works really, really well.
Yeah, I think it's because it's more of a detective drama with like the added layer of things in. I think it's quite accessible to non-science fiction people, and it's not overly too complicated.
Yeah.
So basically, if you're not us, if you're not me, who's going to question the actual plot hole of them not bumping into each other, there's a level of... If you're unfamiliar with time travel as a whole, as a concept, I think this is going to be a very fun, interesting novelty, written in a way that you're going to understand it. As anyone who's watched a Star Trek episode is going to kind of find gaps in the logic straight away. But for what it is at the time, in a pre-Russell T Davies Doctor Who, I think it's doing its job quite well.
Yeah.
Plus, Terence Hardiman is basically hamming it up and chewing the scenery.
Oh, he's great.
And I love him for it. I absolutely love him.
Terence Hardiman, it is stunning because I don't know if you two know, but they remade The Demon Headmaster.
Oh, yes, that's amazing. That reboot is amazing.
It's good. It's got a real air of menace to it as well.
Yeah, it's well done. And yeah, sorry for the tangent, but that pays off for anyone who's watched the original series. About halfway through, it starts saying, okay, if you stuck with this, we're going to pay you back for sticking with this. And then it just tickles. I mean, because I recently, a couple of years ago, I rewatched that show, and and then, spoilers, Terence Hardiman actually shows up in the end, and I shit myself scared. I was like, oh my God.
He's never looked young, but he never seems to get that much older.
Yeah. And or if he just stares at me, yeah, I would be genuinely terrified if I'm in a room with him. He might be the nicest person in the world, but if I'm in a room with Terence Hardiman, I will cack myself.
I'm sure I've seen him in something where he's not playing a villain or someone even remotely suspect, and it felt wrong. Mm-hmm. Just wrong.
Yeah.
So add the Demon Headmaster to our list of iconic characters, actors, etc. Back in the kitchen, Holly is making souffle. Slade tells her to serve it up while he searches for the murder weapon, Mrs. Lombard's gun. In the dining room, Michael and Mark are still trying to convince Lombard, and then he's randomly really fucking vile to his wife. Holly serves a terrible souffle and quickly leaves.
Yeah, it's kind of a payoff to the gag, because you don't really see it that much. You just see it looks up. The brief flash of it looks awful, and then it sort of smokes, and they run away. I quite liked that bit, to be fair. I thought it was quite funny. Just these horrible, horrible people, and she just gives them this terrible souffle. It's like, good, you deserve a crap souffle.
Slade searches the bedroom and, after going through various drawers, including knickers and stuff, takes the gun. He lobs it in the bushes and then notices that the lamp wasn't broken yet. He then heads back inside, despite the fact they're running out of time, and gets caught searching the office. Lombard threatens them with a gun, and then Mr. Morato calls. And so, rather than call the police or do anything else, he just kicks them out. And really? But okay.
What, that he kicks them out?
Yeah. I mean, he's fucking pulled a gun on them and then just gone, chill, off you go.
Well, I think he does phrase it quite well in that he thinks they're petty thieves.
Mm.
So and by the sounds of it, he's like, I've dealt with people like you before, but he's about to become an incredibly rich man. So he just like, bugger it, I haven't got time for this, get out. And, pointing a gun at someone, I think, will give you enough motivation to run away.
Mm.
Well, let's put it this way. Matt, if Terence Hardiman pointed a gun at you and told you to get out...
I'd be halfway up the M5 at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Holly tells Slade that Lombard is going to be shot in 4 minutes, but then Slade hears a silencer go off much earlier than that. He escapes via a first-floor window and then climbs onto a balcony. He then gets shot and falls as the lamp smashes.
That can I just quickly comment? One of the things I found quite interesting about that is that I was watching that scene with him scrambling across the guttering, and it's all very close up, foot on guttering and stuff. And I'm there going, oh yeah, there's no wide shots here. You can easily tell they don't want to put it in there. And as soon as I said that, it's like the show went, fuck you, Latham, and then put a wide shot where you've got what's obviously a stunt guy, but it's like a wide shot of the whole thing, and I'm like, oh fuck you.
I had that as well. On the close-ups, it's like he's on the ground, and just doing it. It was the equivalent of the Batman and Robin walking up the side of the building acting.
Yeah,
brilliant. Love that acting.
But yeah, then they cut to the wide. It's like, oh, they did it, but you get the feeling they did it once. Yeah, it's good because your hero in the first episode has seemingly just got shot in the head.
Yes. He gets a soft landing, though, and lands on, like, a cushioned outside chair. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you've seen something like Spooks, where there's a character that's set up as a main character and then just gets brutally murdered, that's something you might consider might happen. But I think you're right. The peril of the main goodie getting shot is possibly not what you'd have expected so soon in the series. You're right.
And he does that thing of, it's my favourite sort of acting, I'm awake, no I'm not, thunk, and then the head just drops. And then he does the reverse when he comes to, which he just shoots awake like he was having a nap and somebody woke him up.
Oh, don't get me started on my deep, deep dislike of film and television science when it comes to biology, because it's all bullshit.
Yes, but you have to remember, this is Jeff Slade.
Yeah.
True. So Holly does find him, and he's okay, and says that they weren't aiming at him. He was kind of just in the way, so he's just got a grazing shot. But he didn't see who shot Lombard. Holly then says that they have to go before the original Slade arrives on the scene. Grisham is with Mrs. Lombard, who says how wonderful he was. And I don't know, this whole Mrs. Lombard saying he was wonderful thing, did she believe that, or was she being gaslighted, or was she lying for a reason? I couldn't get my head around why she was so positive about her cunty husband.
It was to set up that she might have been the killer. You know,
okay.
That's the thing. We all know that he was a prick, but if she turns around to the police like, he was such a great man, and this, that, and the other, you know. Also, you've got the thing of hopefully the deal's still going to go through. She still wants to be super rich, because we've seen earlier in the episode she spends her days going out and getting her nails done and doing this, that, and the other. So for her, she's trying to be as on side as possible so no one thinks it's her. And I mean, it turns out it's not her, spoiler. But yeah, it's also, you almost don't want to damage the reputation of the company by saying, oh, he's an arse, because then the company's essentially dead in the water, isn't it?
True. Michael comforts her, and Mark says they never argued. And then they point out that it won't be Mark taking over the company, it will be Michael. Ooh.
He's got the hair for it. He walks like a power walk as well.
He's got future cabinet minister on his forehead, he has.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. I mean, as long as he doesn't do something stupid like kill his own dad, I mean, he's got, like, or shoot his own dad, then he's got a future as a really annoying, kind of memeable cabinet minister.
Yeah, you could see him standing outside his house denying something to the press.
Yeah. No. He just walked into a cake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake.
Naked.
Slade hasn't left yet, and then gets caught by a police officer as he's getting into the catering van, and he's forgotten the key. He clocks the police officer and then gets grabbed by more officers and again, hitting his colleagues. This isn't okay.
They're not his colleagues. That's established. They're local police.
But what would, I'm assuming I'm assuming Slade and that are all CID. Because they're all DCs and all DCIs and stuff. They would still recognise, they should know and recognise uniformed police officers, shouldn't they? Or it's not.
Well, this is the thing. If they, I think it's because was it Grisham made a point of saying local police are on the way. So, and when Slade is there initially, he's told that the police have put the Wilsons in the spare room, and Morris hasn't seen them. He's just guarding the door. So I like it, that little details like that. They're the police. They might not know who Slade is, or Slade doesn't turn up till a bit later. So those people may have gone. You know what I mean, and just been replaced by whoever. So they may never cross paths again. That
reads to me that perhaps Horowitz rewrote that line in when realising, crap, we need to have some conflict. How do we write that Slade punches a police officer?
Yeah.
But for someone who doesn't recognise him. So that might just be, okay, I'll just fit this reference earlier in the script.
Also, he's not wearing the yellow jacket.
True.
And they end up being locked in a bathroom that we know that they will escape. Grisham tells Morris to guard the door and that Slade can deal with them when he gets there. So, the problem is the peril of meeting yourself isn't there because we know that they are going to escape.
Yeah, true. That's an interesting one, because there's that whole thing of, with time travel ones, that time loops, like something will have to happen for the first time at some point. And because, as we know, they've gone, and there's certain things that are different and certain things that aren't. It could go wrong. We don't know. Holly's very much stating like, time does this, time does that. She doesn't know for definite. She's just kind of going off what she knows, like textbook definition. So her saying that it could happen anyway in the beginning, like we can't run into ourselves because of the schism thing, kind of sets up like, well, they're trapped in a room, Slade's on his way, and he'll be dealing with them. So there's that possibility of like, oh, it could go wrong this time, and we could run into Slade versus Slade, just Slade on Slade action, and then the universe ends. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that you read it as that, but I read it as trusting the scientist. So, yeah, okay. Maybe other people would look at it differently to me. Okay, fair enough. The 1 hour timer goes off, and Holly confirms that her dad got trapped in a loop of infinity when he missed the timer. When Morris does go to the loo, like they knew he would, they pick the lock and escape. They grab the keys to the catering van and zoom off. They then encounter the real caterers in another identical van on the road. And then they quite easily traverse them, and the caterers just carry on, even though there's someone in a van that they nicked. Okay.
Again, I like this because it cuts to Nicky putting out like an APB for the van. And he says he doesn't know what the license plate is, but he knows it's got a knife, fork, and spoon on the side. So it just ties. They come out of this the worst in this whole situation because they've done nothing wrong, and then they get arrested.
It's awful. Those poor caterers.
Where would they get arrested? Would they get arrested by the quote-unquote local police, so that when they're in the police station, they don't see Slade and Holly and go, he's the one who waved the gun at us?
Yeah, presumably. Yeah. That would be the thing, because everything has to kind of... This is the thing, if you're working with loops and time travel, everything does have to tie up somehow in order for... Otherwise, the show couldn't carry on, really, because it'd be like, well, everything's back to normal, but these guys are saying you waved a gun at them. So if they just get nicked by the local plod, and then I'm guessing they'll find a way off screen, they'd probably get released because there's no real evidence against them. Like they could thing is, if they bring in the local police who doesn't know who Slade is, and they go, "Is this the man that hit you?" No, then they'll just let them go, presumably.
True.
I've really got a grasp on this that I didn't think I had.
Slade and Holly abandon the van away from Holly's flat, so it's not noticeably too close, but police spot them and give chase on foot. They split up and agree to meet at the flat. The police lose them, and Slade goes into a bookies, and he'd previously got knowledge of who'd won an important race at 40-1.
10 minutes remaining. You're going to get trapped in a loop of infinity forever where you relive the same week. What shall I do? I know. Let's try and make a couple of £100.
I mean, I'd quite like a couple of £100, but I'm not sure I'd take that risk. You're right.
It seems to happen in a few episodes where they think that they're going to make some money in various ways, and it just backfires completely. Oh, dear.
So they meet at the flat with 3 minutes to go, and they cause Danny's accident. They can't go back as they don't have time. They get back to the machine with 2 seconds to go. 2 seconds in the first episode, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I can't remember now what happens when they walk back out, but presumably when they walk back out, Danny still had a car accident. And he saw them. He definitely saw them when they ran past him and he crashed his car.
I don't think he's clocked who they were, though.
Oh. Yeah, because they ran into the building and he was looking at the building. and yelling.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Oh, well, yeah.
The parallel dimension has meant that Slade isn't injured. He calls her a genius, and she calls him reckless. And he says that he's learnt enough to crack the case.
Yeah, the parallel dimension thing. I was thinking about this, right? Because when we're trying to figure out the headcanon thing, there's that whole thing of from a certain point in time, there's a distinct number of. I'm actually drawing with my fingers on the desk while I'm doing this.
I can't see that, Carl.
I know, but this is just to point out what I'm doing. So from a fixed point in time, it can go off. Any decision can cause a multiple sort of different realities. So so from there, they've gone back in time, and then they've come back again. So it's in the same way that Marty McFly goes to the Biff horrific 1985 in Back to the Future 2, but by the end he comes back and everything's normal, but there's changes. It kind of feels like that in the sort of like they've come back to a certain point from their dimension, which wouldn't have them coming out at the same time at the beginning, and then the dimensions have merged and they've just carried on from that point.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. So Slade goes to Grisham with a charge sheet for Mark. Mark spots him as he is hauled towards the cells, and he calls him Wilson, but he's not believed when he says that Slade was there.
Wilson! Sorry.
Slade explains that he shot him earlier than they thought with a silencer and then set it up to look like suicide with a second shot. He then hid behind the door when Barbara found the body. He then says it was the lamp that inspired him to work it out.
I quite like that ending because you do see him notice the alcove. It does make sense that he wasn't shot at. He just happened to be in the way, which you'd think he did just like lean. He just turned, pointed the gun out the window, and fired, and so he didn't see Slade. I love the fact that Morris's ignorance kind of saves Slade's arse. In the fact he was like, he was there, of course he was, and I'm Father Christmas, and just marches him off.
Yeah, I mean, Morris is the most plot device-y member of the team. I do feel like Grisham and Nikki have got real character, whereas Morris is just genuinely plot device guy.
He doesn't have a first name in the whole series, I think.
No, I don't think he does.
Not that I remember.
I think he doesn't have a first name, I think. That's how well developed the character is.
Slade and Holly go for a posh meal. She reiterates to him that the time travel thing was a one-off, and he tells her he's paying for the meal with his betting winnings. She explains that the paradox has made his winning slip blank.
Which paradox is that? I didn't get this. I don't understand how this works.
The same paradox that healed him, I would assume.
Yeah, he was never injured in because they're back in the right point. So it's going to take me another half an hour to explain.
Well, the thing that gets me is that he's still. They are both linear. They're going through linear time. They're just going back, but they're still in their physical bodies. So theoretically, they're still aging. I mean, by that methodology, does that mean they don't die? Because if they go back, I mean, if she drags Slade's dead body to the room because he wasn't shot, can he get resurrected from the dead because he wasn't actually shot originally?
Fascinating, and I think that's probably something they would have explored.
Yeah,
if they'd have had more episodes.
If there probably would have been one where one of them's really messed up, and presumably Slade would get really messed up, or maybe that could have been the story for Danny. Danny gets shot, and they take him back and do it. Yeah, I keep thinking there is a way to explain it. I can't think of it now. Maybe over the course of the next 7 episodes, I'll actually get my head around it.
Mm-hmm.
But
so I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah,
it was flawed in a lot of ways. There were some clear plot holes and some heavy exposition-y stuff and some misogyny. But I don't care. It was 50 minutes of a really fun, timey-wimey, cop drama, fun 90s thing.
Mhm.
I'm going to enjoy the next 8 weeks, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at it in terms of like, this is the first episode, and by the end of it, you're in, you know the concept, you like the characters, you don't know everything about them, you want to know more about them, and you like them. And all of this is in the first, 45 to 50 minutes of the series. And I think that's a credit to the performances and the writing. Because normally you could put, some shows would go right completely overboard in that you need a lot of exposition, and I don't think they do that much in this, but it doesn't matter because it's just fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the exposition element of this episode is much more establishment of kind of world building and rules, and I don't think we'll see as much exposition going forward. I think you're right.
I also think that at this point the show's it's not explicitly self-aware, but I think it kind of knows what it's doing in terms of its limitations of the genre, of like the science fiction elements to it. I mean, yeah, it's fun to say like to question about the kind of time travel stuff, but I think the show's like, Basil exposition in the first Austin Powers, where he goes like,
Yes.
Basil, if I'm blah 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 blah, and then basically Basil exposition turns to the audience and goes, I recommend you just sit back and enjoy the ride and not think about it too much. Even though occasionally I think I'll probably will end up, just to raise the question and to annoy the both of you.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be very easy for that entire character of Holly to just be exposition.
Yeah.
And that would literally be all she does, and maybe a bit of a romantic subplot. But she isn't, as we see over the course of the series. She actually has some depth to her.
Yeah, because again, I think one of the things I do think that it was perhaps initially thought of as I said earlier, the Michael French vehicle.
Yeah,
yeah, we're capitalizing on the Dave Wicks thing. The Chloe Annett being cast, I think she must have been. This was cast and filmed way before Red Dwarf 7 was launched, and I don't know. I can't remember if she had anything notable before Red Dwarf 7.
Not really. I actually remember thinking at the time that she got this role because she was in Red Dwarf 7, but I think you're right. She just got them both coincidentally very similar times.
I mean, there's always been a thing with TV, especially in the 90s, of we've got this person. I mean, they do it in American TV all the time. Is we've got this person, we've signed them to a deal, let's put them in stuff. Like when we were talking about the Red Dwarf US pilot, and Chris Barry was worried he was going to it would fail and he'd be put in other stuff and things like that. Maybe that was the case. ITV used to make a big deal out of it in the late 90s, like, oh, we've got Ross Kemp.
The only, I think either the first or the only actor who has that kind of deal for ITV that I'm aware of is Sarah Lancashire. And it's a seven-figure deal, and that's
It's a lot of money. That.
Yeah, I think Sarah Lancashire is the only person of that, the only kind of deal that ITV have made.
I can imagine Saran Jones has got something like that as well. Gentleman Jack and
an old man from Touch of Cloth.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think Chloe Annett, why wouldn't you use her if you have her? She's charming and absolutely stunning.
Yep.
And I think it's sad that we only really saw her in Red Dwarf and Crime Traveller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe, if I'm saying this right, she left to start a family, didn't she? She married into I think she married into, not royalty, but somebody with a title. And
Right.
she just went off and raised a family, and I don't think she very rarely turns up on television again.
No, I think it's a shame because she was charming.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at her on Wikipedia, and she had a few bits and bobs before, but nothing really. She was in Biker Grove, apparently.
Way.
Yeah. But she didn't do so much after that. She had an episode of Casualty an episode of Doctors.
I wonder if, because Michael French was in both Casualty and Hobby City, I wonder if there was a moment where there was a scene with the two of them.
Oh, he just walks past and double takes, and they just look a bit awkward at each other, and it's like, and it's revealed that Michael French's character is really Jeff Slade.
The Jeff Slade cinematic universe. That every single thing that Michael French is now in is because he's Jeff Slade.
Yeah, something goes really wrong on one mission, and he just decides to go and hide and learn to be He's kept in an infinite loop of about 6 years, and during that, he learns how to be a doctor.
Wow. I don't think that's what happens in Casualty somehow.
Don't stifle my dreams, Mark.
Well, we've got 7 more of these, and I'm dead happy about it. So we're not going to overly egg like stuff and promoting podcasts and stuff. Just tell everyone what your Twitter is this week, I think. What's your Twitter, Matt?
It's at Pickadisc.
What's your Twitter, Carl?
I'm at Mr. Carl.
And I'm at Mark Adams HC. If you want the podcast, it's at Red Dwarf Pod. In fact, tell us what you think about us covering Crime Traveller. Are we doing a good thing, or are we really, really pushing it with the specials? I mean,
do we care?
We've recorded them all by the time this airs.
We don't care.
So we're going to send them all out into the universe. But if you have an opinion on Crime Traveller, we'd love to hear it. So do tweet us, and be interesting to see what everyone else thinks and whether or not they think of it as fondly as we do. So thank you for listening to another episode of Shipwrecked and Comatose. And until next time,
damn it, Slade!
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.
Hello, and this is Chucky Vision on the We Made This Network, the podcast for all things Chucky. I'm Dev Elson.
And I'm Mark Adams. We're two queer podcasters who love bloody horror,
Camp comedy, gay romance,
and referencing icons like Freddy, Jason, and Britney.
The Chucky films and new TV show deliver all of that, and there is still so much more to cover.
So if you want to play, find Chucky Vision on Twitter at Chucky Vision and on all good podcast providers.
And yes, the title is a Chuckle Vision pun.
Because why not?